Shaving my head. Nigel is a square unto high heaven, as anyone with Nigel for a name is bound to be. He and Chris invited me down to Ensign a few days ago. I had lunch with them at Cannes, and halfway through it, Nigel announced he'd like me to stop cutting my hair short and start dressing like a girl. He was disapproving of my recent attempt at a very short mohawk. He said himself and Chris would like me to wear short skirts with boots and perhaps some feminine accessories such as earrings, necklaces, bracelets, and other noisy items one couldn't possibly wear close to a microphone. When he finished speaking, I said to Chris, who had been nodding his head in silent agreement with Nigel's every word, "So let me get this straight. He wants me to look like your mistress and the bird he left his wife for." Silence as I stood up and gathered my keys and ciggies. Chris had such a great face. The huge eyes on him couldn't disguise his admiration for the observation or for the mischievousness of finding it so amusing. When I told Faulkner about events, he said, "I think you should fucking shave your head." So I went to the barber the next day, Greek place by a bathhouse near Ensign, and I could call into them straight after the deed was done. I had arranged to swing by on the pretence of having receipts to give Doreen, their lovely secretary, who was a reasonable, older, blonde-haired lady. The man running the barber shop that day was maybe 26. I was 19. He was indeed Greek, mildly plump, short black hair, dark 5 o'clock shadow. Clearly he'd been left in charge by himself, and despite the fact he had no customers but me, he was in somewhat of a flap. I slid into his red leather chair and announced, "I want to look like a boy." And when it dawned on him exactly what I meant, which because I didn't speak any Greek, I made clear by a series of hand gestures that I think might have at first confused him, he went running for the phone on the wall, maybe to call the owner, tears beginning to well up in his eyes. There was no answer. He was all alone. "Please don't make me do it, please," he beseeched, hanging up the phone and walking towards me with his hands held as if in prayer, his tone as soft as if he had given birth to me himself. "Your beautiful hair." When he finally got across the room to me, sensing my refusal to be swayed and seeing my eyes so determined, a blood-curdling terror arose in his mind, and his hands went up instinctively to protect his throat. "What will your father say?" he uttered with a very sharp intake of breath. And, "What will your brother say?" he said as he let it out. Then another sharp breath in and a horrified pause, and then, "Oh my God, what will your boyfriend say? Oh my God." At this, his eyes bulged so with fear that I thought they might pop. And with additional hand gestures, because he didn't speak much Irish, he let me know he really didn't want to risk any males coming around to beat him up. I assured him no one would, though by this stage I was rather considering beating him up myself. After I'd convinced him that I was the sole author of my own destiny despite being female, and explained that my father was in Ireland, conveyed by running around the shop with my arms out like a plane, saying, "Irlandes, Papa est in Irlandes." He agreed to do it, but he made his feelings abundantly clear all the way through. "It's not right to do for girl." When he finished, I stood up to face him, and one tear rolled down his right cheek. Me, I loved it. I looked like an alien. I looked like Star Trek. Didn't matter what I wore now. When I walked through Ensign, I got stunned silence from Nigel. Doreen, with her back to him, gave me a silent double thumbs up with a playful smile, and Chris asked me to sit in the car with him later. "Why have you done it?" "Because I want to be me." "Can't you be you with hair?" I said, "It's you who needs hair, you baldy old fecker, not me. Why don't you let me help you find a doctor?" The Lion and the Cobra. There are tiny lights all up and down the massive mixing board. Red, yellow or green, depending how loud you sing. If you get too loud, they go red, which means there'll be distortion on tape. Object of my game has been to ride the very finest of fine lines between green and yellow, so that it is now less often the case Mr. Happy, the producer, has to worry. I can tell I'm not going to have much of a say in mixes when it comes to vocal level, so I need to be sure every word or end of word I sing in a whisper is going to get heard, because the producer just pulls me down to some random level in the mix and leaves me there. The whispered words get lost, and I didn't write them for nothing, so I've made my voice into its own master fader. I did it by watching the lights on my home recording device as I sang into the mic with the volume at just above mid-level. I memorized where green finished and let it sink into my body the same way notes do, so the avoidance of yellow is now part of the songs. You can move around a mic within a certain triangular energy field. The size of each field depends on the type of mic. Some require you to be on top of them, as we call it, because the space in which they pick up your voice is so tiny. Others have a larger field and you can throw your head about in order to achieve what you want without the lights going past green. You let your body use the field the same way an actor uses a stage. How far is too far? How close is too close? You can feel it with your face. I'm in the middle of recording my first album. Nigel chose the producer, who's a fucking moron and has absolutely no sense of humour, and he needs one given his terrible beard and how embarrassing he's making my record sound. Not only have I lost my own sense of humour, but I'm a little more drained of the will to live each time the producer plays a song back. I've literally been crying on the inside, smiling on the outside, because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. The only people I've discussed it with are John Reynolds and Faulkner. John's been here in the studio the whole time because he's the drummer and we're staying together. So we've often talked about perhaps running away to the other side of Mars in the event the record comes out with our names on it. In the beginning, in an excellent demonstration of how the term anal retentive might be used in a musical sense, the producer spent hours just getting the bass drum sound right, or just the hi-hat, before recording a note. All day long. Who does that? He had the band waiting whole days to play, which meant me waiting late nights to sing, all because he couldn't or wouldn't take a musical shit. He's had his back to me mostly and he wears a lot of grey. He sits at the centre of the soundboard in the producer's chair, which is always the biggest of the 3 swivel chairs in the room. He actually doesn't so much sit at the desk as lean over it with his head in his hands, a position of defeat. He looks like he's planning to fake his own death. About a fortnight ago, Faulkner said that despite the fact I didn't know how to use the studio equipment, I could start fresh and produce my album myself if I want. All I needed to do was tell an engineer what I wanted. He said that's all a producer did anyway. But, I said, what about the £100,000 the record company has already spent on these recordings? Nigel would have a nervous breakdown. I couldn't upset him like that. If I did that, I may just as well have taken his £100,000 and thrown it down the toilet. Then Faulkner told me something I hadn't realised, that the £100,000 was my own money, because under the contract, such costs were fully recoupable. Still, I said I couldn't hurt Nigel's feelings. But then someone asked me for something on Nigel's behalf, something that wasn't in our contract, and that has made me stop caring about either his money or his feelings. We were in the studio on Friday night, recording a cover of The Doors' Crystal Ship, and I couldn't reach a high note. That had never happened before. I got really mad after the millionth failed attempt and I punched the mic. That had never happened before either. As I heard it hit the ground, I thought, I'm pregnant. Saturday morning I bought a test from the chemist before I went to the studio. had to pee in a tiny glass tube that had a small globule of light yellow jelly inside, and then sit the tube in a little holder that had a small mirror underneath, in which soon a lovely pink circle appeared. Beautiful looking thing it was too, like a little planet. I immediately ran and grabbed a cushion from one of the studio reception area sofas and dashed back to the bathroom so as to stuff it up my jumper so I could see what I'd look like all fat with a baby. I turned myself this way and that in the mirrors and jumped up and down with excitement, so happy. John was the father, and when I told him my news the next day at Hammersmith Market, he was shaken. I fell totally out of love with him, and my heart closed. I couldn't have sex with him anymore. I didn't tell him why because I felt guilty, so I told him there must be something wrong with me in the sex department. When I told Nigel, he smiled nicely and said I should go to Ensign's house doctor to initiate my pregnancy care. I went the next evening. The doctor told me Nigel had already called him and expressed the wish that he, the doctor, would impress upon me the following, which he, the doctor, said in the following words: "Your record company has spent £100,000 recording your album. You owe it to them not to have this baby." Furthermore, he informed me that if I flew while pregnant, my baby would be damaged. And anyway, if I was going to be a musician, I ought not have babies, because a woman shouldn't leave her baby to go on tour, and at the same time a child can't be taken on tour. I haven't cried so much in years. Nigel can shove his 100,000 and his producer. I'm starting again. Clocks and walks. So I'm at least 100 grand in debt starting off, and I earn only 5 grand a year. If this record doesn't make that money back and more, because it's the second time it's been recorded, I will never be financially independent of people with penises. Speaking of which, I'm also nearly as pregnant as a person can be. Baby is rolling around nicely, and I'm beside myself with excitement. I hope it's been okay in there when I've been recording vocals. Some of the songs are nothing but a load of yelling. I got thrown out of an Italian cafe in Charing Cross last week by the old lady running the place because I had on, cut so short that my bump was exposed, a white t-shirt on which was printed, "Always use a condom." She wasn't seeing the funny side. I'm staying in an old-fashioned bed and breakfast place in Putney. I'll be staying there for the next 3 weeks while we mix the album. It's a red brick family-looking house with, thank God, only one flight of stairs. The street is a family-looking street. The houses are all family-looking. Cream linen handkerchiefs with tiny lilies embroidered in each corner are folded in triangles on my bedside cabinets. A glass jug with a belly like mine sits in vain hope, full of water on the shelf by the telly. I haven't touched it. I've enjoyed waddling my fat self along the white fences and overgrown trees of the street to the studio for the past few days. All in all, it's a lot nicer than where we stayed when we were recording, the Cipriana Hotel, aptly named because in Dublin a hideous dump is slangily called a kip. There were actually fleas. John Reynolds and I endured every manner of them and their tiny teeth in the nights, but we did so gladly, because we were acutely aware that our being there meant we had by some miracle become ex-thieves and now had the chance of earning a legitimate living. If we hadn't been in the music business, we'd be stealing a lot of stuff together and ending up in separate jails. When John and I first met, the back of his car was full of clocks and walks. He and his mate had broken into some vast warehouse. It was coming up to Christmas, and they had no money. They were selling some of the clocks and walks they'd stolen and giving others to the females in their lives as Christmas presents. John's mother got a clock and a walk. The less revered females got one or the other. The thing I'm going to remember most about making our record is when I met John Keogh. He was lying on the floor outside the studio toilet hugging himself because he just jacked up a load of smack. "Hello, sinead," he slurred in his East London accent, and then giggled at himself as his eyes rolled up into the back of his head. Just as I lifted my foot to step over him, he said, "Don't worry, I won't look up your skirt." He is the bass player with Max, and we were recording their song, Just Call Me Joe. He has thick black eyelashes, long as spiders' legs. His eyes are real pale yellow-green, look like dandelion clocks. Whenever he's been at my place, his eyes have spun around on his face like the snakes in the Jungle Book because he's always on the Class A drugs. But he's not a snaky person. He's an innocent. That's why he can't bear the world. He leans against my door, says he has no sisters, so he likes talking to me. He looks at me like he's impressed, like a child in awe. I ask him why. He said he should never have been asked to be a grown-up, and I should never have been asked to be a child. He's impressed that anyone would want to be a grown-up. His smile makes people smile because he slightly cry laughs. He tries to hide that he's so beautiful because he gets beaten up for it around his neighbourhood. He'll turn his face away or look down. He dresses scruffy and has zits, and his teeth are all grey from smack and yellow from everything else. But he does employ the smile when the smack has closed his eyes. He's very clever. It's always for other people's benefit, never his own. He wants us not to worry about him. He wants us to think he's okay, but he isn't okay. Eventually, he falls asleep in the bath. For the mixing, it's been just me and the engineer and the tape ops. They get the shitty jobs mostly, running around making endless cups of tea and coffee for musicians and producers, having to be in before everyone else and be last to leave, having to go out to the shops for sandwiches or any other fancies of the contingent. They're nerds, but strictly in the sense that Superman is a nerd. And from observing them, I've come to realise that if it were not for nerds, no records would ever have been made. There'd just be a load of stoned musicians and coked-up record executives, the latter too busy pleading not guilty to aggravated sexual harassment on the grounds of being over-coked and getting away with it to be of any service in the recording process. No other type of man is capable of performing the task from which a tape-op takes his name. This man could do something no other man would dare risk. The bosses in the studio situation make him do it, because among all of them he is the least to lose. But the fact that he can do it makes him king over all. He can splice the tape to make an edit. So if the first half of the song went along nicely, but the second half was shite, and it was the other way round on the previous take, he could make a slice with a Wilkinson sword razor blade across the tape just before it all went wrong, and make a slice in the previous tape just before it all went right, and stitch them together with special adhesive so that the whole song is right and you don't have to record all over again. He does it by getting the producer to play the track, and then once the desired place of edit has been established, the track is put into slow motion playback around that area. As these playbacks are happening, the tape op is eyeing the tape as it rolls around the two reels. Eventually, he will take hold of the sides of both reels and turn them this way and that until the song gets so slow and the vocal so deep that it sounds like a horror movie. He'll keep turning the tapes until he finds the shortest of breaths in the music and observe where it is on the tape. Only when his eye can recognize it will he remove his hands, at which point he pulls a 4-inch section of the tape from between the two reels down onto a little steel bridge that looks like a leprechaun's train tracks and makes a vertical line with tailor's chalk. He has one slice in which to get it right. Disaster will result if he messes it up. A lot of money and a lot of artistic temperament is in the room. Knuckles are desperately held between teeth. Everyone's silent as a ghost for the 1.5 minutes it takes for the cut to be made, the adhesive applied, and the tape played back. Because he is Lord of all, it never goes wrong. It is pristine on the first shot. He gets to rest a while, with his feet on the cream leather poof, having coffee and biscuits brought to him for a change by whoever the bosses are. He is cosmetic surgeon to the stars. My Boy Lollipop, July 1987. Jake went blue in his little blanket from toe to head in my room on me. So I got the nurse and she grabbed him and ran off down the corridor. She wouldn't let me come. I was frantic. An older nurse was passing by my door, and out the window behind her I could see the opposite wing of the hospital, the part where people go to die. I took her by the arm and pleaded, "My baby went blue and they've taken him. He's not going to die, is he?" "I hope not," she replied and kept walking. Jesus, that would never happen in Ireland. Someone would hold your hand. But I'm at John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford. I'm 20 years old, like. This is my first baby. I've never been so frightened in my life. That night of his birth, I had a terrible dream that the doctor came into the room with the child all wrapped in a blanket, and he gave the child to me, but as I put the child up on my shoulder, he fell out of the blanket and onto the floor, and his little forehead broke like a teacup. I hoped that that was not a bad omen for my parenting skills. He's back now, thanks be to God. They put him in an incubator for an hour. He's a little early and he's only 6 pounds 6 ounces. I'm kinda tiny, so he is too. That's what the nurse said. Also, after he came out, I think they left him on me too long without wrapping him up. They were so busy faffing with the placenta, he froze his little butt off. It's hot inside a body, so it stands to reason it's freezing when you come out. Nothing in the books warned me, so I didn't have a blanket, and the birth room didn't have one. He wasn't wrapped up for a good half an hour. A friend at John's told me to drink a load of castor oil as soon as I went into labour. I don't know why I took her advice. She said it would make the birth easier, but then she's the one who 9 months previously told me the 14th day of your cycle is the only day you can't get pregnant. She never told me if I drank castor oil I'd shit for Ireland, and the birth would be so quick there'd be no time for drugs. There was a poor little student nurse in a blue uniform on that night. She couldn't have been more than 18. It was really late. She had to keep giving me little grey papier-mâché bowls to shit in, and then she had to carry them away when they were full. I must have filled about 20 of them. The blackest looking shit I've ever seen in my life, apart from the one my lovely little son did about half an hour after he was born. That was like tar toothpaste. I'm thus very impressed with him so far, but also because he's really cute and red and hairy. He's exactly like a baby monkey. Jake was born at 4 minutes to 4 a.m. Long, rough night. John went home to get some sleep after showering the blood off me at about 5 a.m., a task magnanimously assigned to him by the midwife, as though it were the greatest honour one could bestow upon a man who spent the night watching his woman give birth, in and all over his poshest white dinner shirt. Word to the wise, never lend a full-term pregnant woman an item of clothing you want back. He's not too happy about the haircut I gave him the night before last, so he had fun splattering me against the tiles with cold water instead of warm. My defence is that he asked me to do it, and anyone who puts someone with my haircut in charge of his own deserves what he gets. I sheared the sides rather badly, and I don't know how to blend. He nearly cried when he saw it. But I think I've made up for it because he loves his little baby, and he said I can wear his blue and white nightshirt. And his mom is going to come down from Liverpool the day after tomorrow to see her first grandchild. She's lovely, John's mum. I love her. She's from Yorkshire, and she's as bold as a little child, eating sweets when she's diabetic. Betty is her name. It really suits her, 'cause she has big brown Betty Boop eyes. She has a crazy dog, though. No way am I bringing Jake to her house. The postmen keep quitting. She's had her garage converted into a front room, all pretty and flowery. What was the garage door is now a huge window. Stupid dog keeps launching himself through it when anyone passes the gate. It's a Doberman. I hate it. It pinned me against the wall for ages the second I met Betty. So embarrassing. Betty's so nice to John. She just adores him. She only pretend scolds him. He farts out loud all the time around her and they crack up laughing. John's sister, Maria, is the same. Maria has tons of tattoos, but Betty doesn't know. I wish I were Betty's daughter, or one of the kids she raised. She's so kind and gentle. Her voice is so loving and warm. It goes up and down like a mother's voice should. Her boys come to visit her still. They're men now, like John. They adore her. She loved them into the straight and narrow. They have jobs because of her, and girlfriends and all. One of her sons told his girlfriend he was going around the corner for cigarettes and didn't come back for 2 years. Then they got married. He's really funny. He's going to be a lovely dad. I want to make clear that I don't blame John, or my dad for that matter, for being concerned about me having a baby. There were many reasons to be concerned, and I know they meant the very best for me. I don't believe that in the case of the record company, though. Their only expressed concern was money, whereas John and my father were worried about my youth. Valid concerns based on love, in other words. John really deserves his own chapter in this book because he's like my brother and my best friend in this world. I've known him since I was 18 and he was 28, and that's a long set of years. He has always been there for me as a friend, even when I've been wrong. He has always been my rock and has always taken care of me. I've had the absolute funniest times of my life with John, and I've never laughed so much with any other human being, nor farted out loud as much. John is a legendary farter out loud, and it's catching. Today, his studio is at the top of the home he shares with Fiona, his amazing wife, and their 2 daughters, Jessie and Ruby. All manner of artists have worked and stayed there, from Shayan Kuti to Robert Plant to the Indigo Girls, to myself, to Damien Dempsey, basically anyone you can think of, because John is an utter musical midwife. He is able, sometimes by farting out loud, to make people feel so comfortable that they can fully be themselves in a way they couldn't in any other studio. He always gets the very best out of any performer. John has 2 bull mastiff dogs and loves them like they're his children. He's an amazing father, and Fiona is an amazing mother. I've never once heard a raised voice in their house that wasn't singing. He has been and still is an incredible father to Jake, and thank God Jake is the spit of him, as we say in Ireland. They are so alike. I couldn't find words to describe how much I love John and how much he means to me. He's my family, and I wouldn't have sung nearly anything well if not for the fact I was comfortable enough with him to be recording in there in my pyjamas and slippers, him making me cry laugh with farts emitted in time to backing tracks. I'd be lost without John in my life. I'd be nothing without the companionship and creativity and brotherhood and laughter and emotional support he's given me. He is the very anchor of my life. There just are not words, but the catalogue of music we have made together over the course of the last 35 years says it all, and is the legacy of our bond. A beautiful dance through life we have had together, and still have, and always will have. The way young lovers do. When John went to pick Betty up at the station, I gave Jake his first bath. Poor creature roared crying. It was terrible. He was red all over from upset. He's so little. Betty fell in love. She's so cool. She gave him a statue of a cute fat rabbit with green trousers on and a yellow shirt and a big smile. Having Jake was also somewhat discombobulating. One day, about a week after Jake was born, me and John went out in the car and didn't remember we had a tiny baby until we were about 100 feet down the road. Nearly had a heart attack when we realised. Screeched the car around and went back home for him. Another night I had a terrible nightmare. that I left Jake with my mother to mind him while I went shopping. Never had such a frightening dream in my life. Woke up sweating and feeling for Jake in the low light to make sure it wasn't true. Babies don't actually smile at you for 6 weeks, and when Jakey smiles, it's the most beautiful gummy thing I've ever seen. His whole face and eyes light up. The first time he did it, he was lying on his little belly in my bed. Apart from John Reynolds, the person during that time who unequivocally supported my desire to be both a touring musician and a mother was Faulkner, my manager. He was the only one saying I could be a good mother and that he'd make sure there was always help. I'd known him for 2 years and now he'd become my hero. 3 months after Jake was born and my album was about to come out, reviews were in the papers and our promo trips were kicking off. I'm 20 and in Bloom's Hotel in Dublin. As I carry a tray of coffee to where Joe Jackson from Hot Press is sitting in the bar waiting to interview me, my arms and legs are shaking. We've flown in from London to promote The Lion and the Cobra. I don't know who these people are meeting, but it isn't me. We're in the American Hotel in Amsterdam, and I'm in a room talking to 10 people a day, one after the other, all of them with microphones and notepads in their hands, with cameras and flashing white lights. Will I stand this way or that? I don't even know what town we're in. I don't care what's for lunch. I don't care why I made a record. I don't even know what planet I'm on. Whatever Faulkner thinks is a good idea is a good idea. What he loves, I love. What he hates, I try to hate. All I want to do is keep impressing him. I say whatever I imagine will impress him. I become whatever I imagine will impress him. Sometimes I think I'm more like him than me. There is a light that never goes out. 1987. I am on tour in freezing England, supporting In Excess. Right after I had agreed to tour with them, David Bowie asked me to support his band. It was a disappointment that I couldn't accept, but it's brilliant that he asked me nonetheless. Mike Joyce and Andy Rourke from the Smiths are in my band. Andy is the funniest person I've ever met in my life. I love him. Andy and his brothers would be on acid when the parish priest came round for tea with them and their father. The boys had to try to act normal around the table and not be crying laughing. That's one reason I love Andy. He laughs. Crying laughing is the greatest feeling ever and the funniest thing to watch. Him and Mike are really funny together. They make each other roll around on the floor. I love Mike too. They've made me love Manchester people. Dead straight, no bullshit, no unfrank conversation. Also, they treat me like a boy, which makes me a happy girl. Among musicians, there really doesn't exist the attitude toward females that exists among the suits of the music industry, and that exists generally in Ireland. So while I'm with musicians and road crew, it's good to be a girl. It's mostly guys I'm around, and they treat me like a guy, so I'm learning real well how to be like a guy. You're safer being a travelling musician if you feel like you're a guy. Not safe as in safe from people, but safe from life on the road being rough, and from the fact you're a female uncommon to what is outlined as natural. You're acting like you have the same freedoms as men. That's going to be hard for you to manage. A woman's place is in the home, not on Highway 66, especially if she's a mother, as I am. You're going to be doing your own head in for the rest of your life every time you go to work if you don't keep telling yourself you're a man. It's so lovely when people like Andy or Mike or John Reynolds or John Keogh or John Mabry's gang don't treat me any differently because I'm a girl, except in nice ways, like when Mabry, the video director, gets someone to put makeup on me and keeps telling me I'm pretty. He's gay as Christmas, so it's even nicer than when a straight man says it, because straight men all say it to get laid. John Mabry and all his friends say it because they love girls. They make me feel really nice about being a girl, but I do like to look like a boy. They've never blinked an eye about it. No one does, except poor Nigel Grange. I like to look like John Mabry's friend Alan, basically. He's so handsome, with a crew cut, and he has a soft, lovely voice. His eyes always brimful of gentleness when he looks at absolutely anyone. His whole heart is in his eyes at all times. He doesn't have a temper, and he isn't afraid of people. I wish I were like him. I have a temper, and I'm afraid of most people. Maybury, not long before, had pulled off an amazing musical promotional coup. It's 1987, and there's full war in Northern Ireland, but despite this, Maybury and his crazy lighting man managed to carry pounds and pounds of napalm from Heathrow through Dublin Airport unobserved at either end to use in the video shoot. We rigged up the Hellfire Club, an infamous 18th century ruin on a hill overlooking Dublin. Must have blown it up 5 times. It's a national monument. We didn't even ask permission. The dude who rigged it was an army expert. Nothing fell off or over. We left the structure intact. It was for the video of my first single, Troy. We shot the first part in a freezing cold studio in East London. John had all his friends working on the video. They shaved my head completely bald with a bunch of Bics. Then they covered me from head to chest in pure gold leaf, like that James Bond girl, and sat me to sing in a circle of fire. I was going round and round all day on a little train track, and John told me to keep finding the camera. I looked like a very pissed off alien whose breath sets fire to stuff. Anyway, back to In Excess. I met Michael Hutchins in Dublin Airport when we were all checking in for the first date of the tour. He was really nice to me. He's like a big brother type. He's protective, not flirty or anything. He isn't around much, but when I've hung out with him there's been lots of people everywhere, and he always watches out for me very quietly. No matter if he's chatting someone up across the room on some sofa, or talking to friends or whatever, he makes sure some idiot doesn't talk me into bed or bore me to death with music industry talk. I like him. He doesn't say a lot with words. He says it with looks. He's like some kind of American Indian. During the tour, me and Andy Rourke got beaten up in Liverpool by the bouncer of our hotel's basement disco. Big hairy monster. Looked like he served in Belfast for the Brits. The moustache on him and all. So reminiscent. He didn't like my Doc Martens. Fair enough. They have steel toe caps sticking out, as is the fashion. I have sliced the leather to reveal them. And he didn't like my shaved head. Andy and I went upstairs and I changed shoes. But when we get back down, I still have a shaved head and we've been giggling. Andy's face looked cheeky at the ticket box. He'd got the nervous giggles. Monster Man decided we were in trouble and punched him. And then he ran after us into the lift and beat the shit out of the two of us. One of his friends came and dragged me out of the lift by my shirt neck and up some stairs. Bump, bump all the way, while Monster Man did the same to Andy. We got dumped into the street. The two of us were in bits. I lost it. We went back up to our rooms and I jumped all around the bedroom for an hour, threatening to go down and kill him. Poor Faulkner had to wait for me to fall asleep to make sure I didn't, piling chairs up at the door to keep Monster Man out and me in. There's a very good reason that God made the word touring rhyme with the word whoring. In fact, most of what I can remember about touring, especially in my younger days when I was doing huge US and European tours to support my albums, was it was nothing but sex. That's all any of us had on our minds. We did the gigs. It was a pleasant interlude between doing the gigs. While we weren't busy breaking hearts, myself and the other ladies in my band would often travel on the gentleman's crew bus. Crazy because you just don't do that in America, certainly not without your tour manager. All those buses rocked from side to side all down the highways. I guess we did end up breaking some hearts though, because most of the crew were married or had girlfriends and we wouldn't continue our relationships. At the end of the tour we dumped them like a bunch of hot snots, which was quite cruel because we did like them. It was foolish of them because we were just being sluts. As I said, we liked them. We did. They were nice guys. But they had girlfriends, and as we say in the music business, on tour doesn't count. That's the attitude we had. The tour I best remember was actually for my second album, I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got. At this stage, I had a new manager, Steve Farnoli, who had been Prince's manager. And because Nothing Compares to You on the album had been number one, it was suddenly a whole other world for me on tour. There was a stylist, lighting guys, there was a production, all kinds of pomp and ceremony. I found it hard to get used to because I had a lot of stage fright and I felt like a total imposter. I couldn't understand why anybody liked my songs or why anybody clapped or thought they were good. I really had no self-esteem when it came to songs or anything else. And I'd be playing these festivals or carnivals, and there'd be people screaming nearby on roller coasters, people screaming in terror, and I'd be singing soothing songs to the audience. It was just the weirdest thing, triggering actually. I also got into the habit of singing with my eyes closed, which really upset my manager. I came to prefer it for a number of reasons, including the fact that if you made eye contact with someone's boyfriend, you got scared his girl was going to beat you up afterwards, especially if you were doing a romantic song. Between the thrill ride screams and the fear of jealous rage, I developed the ability to just close my eyes while performing and go into my own world. Touring was ultimately a very lonely thing. There were a lot of people around me, people I loved even, but no one could see me, and I couldn't see myself reflected in anyone anymore. Suddenly there was no one around me who I'd known before I became very famous. I had cut myself off from my family. Not their fault, mine. I found the touring experience of sitting around in hotel rooms all day quite lonely. And the promo thing, I got in trouble every time I opened my mouth. People would ask me a question, I'd answer it, I'd be in trouble. I just couldn't be accepted as a good person. It was hurtful. Everybody was starting to treat me like I was a crazy person too. You're probably not aware of the fact that no matter whether you're the Queen of England or Barbra Streisand or Bob Dylan or anyone else, you may not take a shit on a tour bus. There will be a sign on the door that says no solids. This makes for very interesting touring. I would love to put together a toilet book, if you will, called No Solids. I would like to write to Mariah Carey and Barbra Streisand and even the Queen of England and get them to send me their stories. It would be especially funny if it was only very huge female stars like Celine Dion. My own stories about trying to take poops are not very funny. They're kind of disturbing, actually, so I'm not going to bother. Well, once I got stuck in a field in France, and I couldn't see anything past my face. I was on tour with Sly and Robbie, and the bus is so close to me I can't take a shit because I'm embarrassed. But then it won't come. And the next thing you know, I'm afraid they're all going to get out of the bus, so I can't take the shit, and I'm stuck there, literally. And eventually, somebody does get out of the bus, which makes me so scared that I take the shit. But I'm sure other people have funnier stories than me, because when you're on a tour bus with 14 people, the fact that nobody can take a shit on the bus means you got to stop 14 times at different times of the day or night. Good news, bad news, etc. While Faulkner spoke each word on the phone, "You've been nominated for a Grammy," I saw my life roll up, as if it were a blanket, and vanish, quick as a flash, like I was a dying person. I'd never told anyone. I'm like Stevie Nicks. She keeps her visions to herself. The nomination for Lion and the Cobra in 1989 was career-changing. Of course, my next nomination a couple years later for I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got brought me an inordinate amount of satisfaction on a different level. That's because it hadn't been so long before that Nigel called to say he didn't want to release that album. His exact words were, "It's too personal, it's like reading someone's diaries. It will end up like Terence Trent D'Arby's second album, Gathering Dust in a Warehouse." He'd been privy to the bloody songs for months before recording began, and the thing was already mastered. I wondered what on earth he was on. I think he just enjoyed being piggish. I reminded him that my contract gave me creative control, which meant the album was coming out whether he liked it or not. The man is such a moron. How can a song be too personal? I imagine slapping him lightly about the temples with a large raw fish. That's the only thing to do with stupid people. Within months, I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got is #1 all over the planet, and Nigel hasn't had to so much as lift a phone to make millions for himself. I'm pleased for him, because an idiot can never get laid if he isn't stinking rich. One of the factors contributing to my album's success began in a Paris cemetery. At Père Lachaise, a queen-size bed is carved in snow-white marble. There a young woman lies, wearing a beautiful buttoned nightdress, smiling at her baby, blankets pulled up around them, baby smiling back. Every detail, down to the stitches in the sheets and blankets, perfect. Every smile line under the woman's eyes, even her hair on her pillow. I walked around there most of the day in an extraordinarily expensive coat I wished I could keep. Jerry Stafford, the stylist, told me Père Lachaise even has its own sewage system. I must admit I was slightly freaked at the idea of the dead getting up to take a dump and then shuffling back into their tombs. Also, what do they wipe with? Note to self: never ever go to a graveyard again. We were making the video for Nothing Compares to You. We'd already shot most of the video in London a few days ago, maybe 3 setups. In one, a close-up, I just sang the song along with the track, sitting in a chair wearing a black polo neck. But in the part where it says, "All the flowers that you planted, Mama, in the backyard, all died when you went away," I cried for like 20 seconds. I think that means I wasted their time. I did manage to get my act together and keep singing, but I think it's unusable, so it's good we're shooting all this stuff in Paris. I feel bad I wasted everyone's time and money though. John Maybury, who again directed my video, thought I was crying because me and Faulkner had recently parted ways, but I'm happy about that now. It's better for everyone. I was crying about my mother being dead. I'm still really messed up about it, even though I'm 24. A little embarrassing, but there you go, I'm a girl. In the showbiz parts of Los Angeles, the white walls have beautiful dark pink flowers. The Mexicans live elsewhere, so do the African Americans. The only time you see those people, they're cleaning someone's house. In the New York office of my record company, the colour of the employees' skin is darkest in the basement, which is in the mail room. Their skin gets lighter as the floors go up, as do the stations the employees have their radios tuned to. 2 floors up from the top, no females becomes the scenario also, unless they're in secretarial roles. The bosses didn't like the album cover shot for The Lion and the Cobra, so we had to have a different one for America, but from the same series. They felt I looked angry on the European one. I look like I'm screaming. In fact, I was singing. The very clever photographer made me sing along to my record, which he had cranked up real loud, so it's just what I look like when I'm singing. But the bosses liked the demure look of the one where I'm looking at the floor and my mouth is shut. Apparently females seeming angry doesn't shift units, and they're already handicapped by my hair. The people who run the music industry aren't punk at all. They're a bunch of frightened people, but frightened of the wrong thing, namely music. Hence, in 1991, there was a rap category at the Grammys, but they didn't televise the award, so there was a boycott amongst the rap community. Hence, I once had Public Enemy's logo shaved and dyed onto the side of my head, so it would be seen on telly all around the world. Showbiz just got real interesting. The kids are beginning to revolt, and no one has been revolting since John Lennon died. Rap is the hugest thing in America. All you see are teenagers, referred to as kids by the establishment, sitting on steps with enormous boom boxes, blaring Public Enemy or KRS-One so loud that the bass would nearly make you defecate, or lugging the boom boxes around the streets on their shoulders like they're walking the Stations of the Cross. Similar to Christ's, rap's mission is self-esteem for those previously deemed shit. So it's as dangerous as Christ's, because a lot of kids of all manner are listening, and no one in the industry wants their top floors threatened by either the wrong skin colour or the wrong mindset, that is, anyone who cares about the truth. Kids are the market, but you have to keep them believing they're worth less than the stars, or they won't think they need what stars are selling. Wait till you see. When showbiz execs realise they can't kill rap, they will hijack it. They'll make millionaires of imposter rappers who say things like, "You can't be like me." Funny how time slips away. I actually attended the Grammys for the 1989 show when I'd been nominated for Best Female Rock Vocal, and I performed Mandinka. All through the dress rehearsal, I was anxious because the previous day, when we had arrived in LA, I had gone into one of those little houses on Sunset Boulevard that have a flashing sign in the window saying "Psychic." An ancient Indian woman, plump and wearing a purple and orange sari, emerged from behind a red curtain. "Sit down," she said to me, and pointed to a battered pale green armchair to her left. She went away for a few minutes, came back and plonked herself in its match opposite me. We chatted for about 10 minutes. Nothing in particular came up, other than I told her my mother was dead and that I wanted to know if she was okay wherever she was. She told me, "That's not what I do. You need a medium." And then she said, "Let me see your palm." And I gave her my right hand. She said, "I see dark spirits around you." Big gulp on my part. "Why are they there? How do I get rid of them?" "They're there because you're sad," she said. "You must have a bath and fill a plastic bottle with the water afterwards." And she continued, "For each of your years on earth, you must strap $100 bill to the bottle with elastic and give it to me. That is the cure." I ran back to the hotel and told Faulkner, "I need $2,000 ASAP. He wouldn't give it to me. He wouldn't ask the record company for it. He said I was being had, that the woman was a trickster. I could see he was right, but she'd scared me, so I plagued him all night and morning about it. I wanted to do it anyway. We were still annoyed with each other when it was time to go to the dress rehearsal. We were often annoyed with each other. We sat in the middle of the third row during rehearsal as Sarah Vaughan coughed her way through the song "So Many Stars." I was impressed. That was her warm-up. After she'd coughed and sung it 3 times, her voice was perfect, clear, smokeless, and beautiful. Dizzy Gillespie's cheeks blew out like balloons as he rehearsed. I wanted to kiss them. He looked so cute. Al Green wore a shirt made from gold. It looked like a ton of tiny chains all stitched together. Someone introduced us to him. He smelled amazing, like perfume, not aftershave. I joked that I should ask him if he would marry us, since he's a minister, but I don't think a marriage between 2 such grumpy people as us would be much fun. I met Anita Baker. She was rehearsing too, wearing a gorgeous black and gold dress. I love her. She's so beautiful. She was holding a long-stemmed red rose. She gave it to me, and she said she liked Mandinka. She said, "Your voice is cavernous." When I got back to my hotel room after the rehearsal, a massive arrangement of pink balloons with balloons inside them was tied to a chair. I had never seen such a thing. The record company had sent them. For the show, I wore a short top and a pair of jeans, and I stuck the arms of Jake's sleep suit through the belt loops at the back so that it hung down my arse. Later, when I got home to Ireland, I put it on my mother's grave. It's still there, though much more frail. It is sunken into the mud and rocks. It used to be blue and white. Now it's yellow, like someone soaked it in chamomile tea. My older brother was angry that I put it there. He found it an upsetting image. He thought it a messed up thing to do, but I meant it as a souvenir for her from the Grammys. Because all the time I was there, I was thinking how she would have loved to be there too, and she was never going to meet her grandson. I wanted to give her something of him. Paper Roses. My second Grammy nomination came in 1991. It was very different from my initial honours because I didn't go, and I rejected the award I won for Best Alternative Music Performance. To the great consternation of many, I refused all the awards I was personally offered for my second album, because I knew, after how I'd spent the year being treated by the industry and media, that I wasn't getting awards because of anything I stood for. Rather, I was getting awards because I'd shifted a lot of units, sold a lot of records. Commercial success outranked artistic merit. I made a lot of money for a lot of men who couldn't actually have cared less what the songs were about, and in fact would prefer I told no one. I make plain as I'm refusing awards and award shows that I am doing so in order to draw attention to the issue of child abuse, and that I'm a punk, not a pop star, and that awards make some people feel more than, and some people feel less than, and that music shouldn't be such a competition. There is outrage at me throughout the industry. In England, the Brit Awards are hosted by Jonathan King, a hugely popular television DJ. For some reason, he spends 10 minutes viciously attacking me for my stance. It's quite baffling. His eyes are bulging and his mouth is foaming. He's so angry. How dare the little Irish upstart associate music with child abuse? Not too many years later, when he's convicted and jailed for repeated acts of pedophilia, his rage makes sense. In America, I'm bullied very badly by certain men on the night I skipped the Grammys. In fact, I'm even spiked at a watching party in Eddie Murphy's house, which scares the shit out of me. I leave LA 3 days later and go back to England. I give my LA house to the Red Cross. I don't want anything to do with the trappings of so-called success anymore. Shiviti Adonai Lenegdi Tamid. I tried to get lessons in Jewish ways of understanding the scriptures, but no one would take me because I'm not Jewish. Nor have I yet found myself that much fantasized about handsome rabbi who wants to marry me, so I have to become Jewish because I truly love him. The closest I've been able to get is Kabbalah classes with a very kind teacher named Zev Ben Shimon Halevi in a small school in gorgeous Regent's Park. Happened to be I had a class both myself and the teacher sadly knew would be my last, a few days after I'd heard that Nothing Compares to You and I Do Not Want What I Haven't Got had gone to #1 in America. Appropriately, the moment I'd heard, I was sitting on a toilet, I can't remember whose, with the door open as usual for the purposes of easy chat. Whoever it was who told me got cross with me because I didn't take the news happily. Instead, I cried like a child before the gates of hell. That night, I dreamed I was a golden orchestra triangle, with arms and legs and a face, just making my way through Regent's Park, along old dusty paths. People were running up, taking pieces of my body. I had to rush home, get an old raincoat and cover myself up wherever I went. If people knew I was made of gold, someday there'd be none of me left. Soon as I arrived for my last lesson, the Kabbalah teacher spun me out the classroom door by my elbow, took me into the corridor, and whispered loudly in my ear, "You know fame is a curse, and the devil is a gentleman." I nodded in the affirmative, and he swung me back in saying, "Don't forget to leave the party before they all get drunk and start fighting." 9 months later, my tour has finished, And I've rented a house in Los Angeles because my manager said I couldn't go home until after the MTV Awards. Spanish-looking house, halfway up a hill. Beautiful old white stucco on the outside. Even a tiny cross at the front door, just like Ireland. I can see the Hollywood sign way off to my left when I'm on my patio. Sometimes there are deer meandering about amid the trees to my right. One whole wall of the downstairs sitting room is a glass window facing Los Angeles. At night, it's like a black frame around the lights of living hell. Every time the dusk comes, I get anxious. I had my bedroom painted purple. I thought, what the hell? You can have a purple bedroom in America. That's the whole point. In Ireland, you'd never have a purple bedroom unless you were a hooer. And since in Ireland sex is a sin, you can't be a hooer because you wouldn't have any customers. So no one has ever had a purple bedroom apart from Archbishop John Charles McQuaid. As I'm figuring out what to wear one midweek morning, the phone rings in my room. An effeminate but irritated male voice asks, "Is that Sinead O'Connor?" I say, "No, this is Sinead O'Connor," just to wind him up. Then I ask him who he is. He says he's Prince, says he wants to send a car down for me later and let's hang out. I met him in a club when The Lion and the Cobra came out, but we never really talked. We were just getting off on the tunes the DJ was playing, Sly Stone and such. We haven't spoken since. He didn't have anything to do with my recording of Nothing Compares to You. His call to my purple bedroom is the first time we've been in contact since 1988. I'm 23. When I tell my friends about Prince's call, they get romantic ideas. We all thought maybe me and him would fall in love. At the very least, we imagined me and him would get on well, because the lovely Steve Farnoley, who had become my manager, had previously managed him and had introduced us. We thought, he must be wanting to celebrate the song doing so well. There'll be cake. Princes always have cake. I was thrice wrong, and my poor girlfriends went from agape to aghast when I later told them what went down. At 9 p.m., from the darkness of my bedroom window, I see the long black limousine slink to a silent stop at my gate. I imagine I'm in a spy movie, about to be driven to a secret location where I'm going to be given my next mission. The stereotypical driver with suit and hat is behind the wheel. I'm a yapper, so on the way I ask him all about Prince and what the house is like, etc. He never says one word, just looks at me scared every now and then in the rear view mirror, as if I've asked him for directions to Dracula's castle. Very strange. Usually drivers like to chat as much as girls do. We drive a long time before winding our way up a black dark hill, at the top of which appears a large house, very dimly lit. We pull into its driveway. The front door is to my right. It seems we're in a courtyard, beyond which, facing me about 200 feet away, I discern some outbuildings. I get out of the car, and the driver gestures with his head to say I could go ring the doorbell by myself. This I do. I wait several moments and nothing happens. I ring again and still nothing. I turn round to ask the driver's opinion as to what I ought to do, but he and the limousine have vanished. Just as I'm realizing I have no idea where I am or how to get home in the event no one is in, and that the road is so dark I won't be able to see farther than my eyelashes, the door opens slowly with a creak. I'm thinking the person behind it is going to say, "You rang?" like in the movies, and be named Igor. Turns out his name is not Igor, but I don't find that out until later. Seems like nobody speaks around here. They just use movements of the head. He indicates I'm to step inside and follow him. This I do, observing in his deportment a definite air of master, master, though he's not quite dragging one leg. His chin is down, his arms are straight by his sides, his shoulders are attempting to protect his heart. Through two enormous reception rooms, unlit, but for what little light dribbles in from the hallways, we roam. In each one a window, I'd say 20 feet high and 10 feet wide, is completely covered with several finely applied layers of aluminium foil. What's with that? I gesture with my head to Igor as he's turning round to make sure I'm not falling over anything in the dark. He utters the only 4 words I hear him say in the 2 times I see him that evening. He don't like light. The second time I see him, his body and being are paralyzed with fear. But for now, I'm delivered to an oddly well-lit small kitchen in the middle of which is a small square breakfast bar around which people could sit if there were stools. Poor Igor makes himself scarce. Enough minutes go by with no one coming that I feel safe to quickly peek in the cupboard under the sink to see what cleaning products Prince uses. After all, what woman wouldn't want her kitchen gleaming like a palace? Actually, it's a bit of a mess in there, so I set about sorting it for him. Soon, there's a swoosh sound and a sweet smell from somewhere behind me. I turn around. Prince is in the doorway. Old fluffy cuffs, done up like the dog's dinner. Seems like he's wearing literally all the makeup that was ever in history applied to the face of Boy George. Looks like I did when I went with Jerome Kearns to a school prom. You must be Sinead, he says. You must be Prance, I reply. The breakfast bar is between us. He doesn't cross it. The refrigerator is to his right and to my left. You want a drink? He smiles. Yeah, anything non-alcoholic, please. It being the case I don't like alcohol because it makes me puke, and puking isn't a good look for Cinderella. It also being the case my granny taught me to always say please and thanks. He turns his back to reach up in the cupboard for a glass, and then quick as a flash, he spins round, slams the glass down so hard in front of me that I don't know how his hand doesn't go through it, and says, "Get it yourself." I've seen this before. I grew up with it. I know it like the back of my hand. I start mentally checking for exits without taking my eyes off him. I realize I don't know where I am. I never asked for an address. I don't know how to find the front door. It's dark. I don't know how to find a cab. I'm away off up in some hills, very far from the highway is all I know. And it doesn't look like he's got me here for cake. He commences stalking up and down his side of the breakfast bar, arms crossed, one hand rubbing his chin between his thumb and forefinger as if he had a beard, looking me up and down like, A, I'm a piece of dog shit on the end of his shoe, and B, he's figuring out where upon my little body to punch me for the fullest effect. I don't like this, and I don't appreciate it. And I don't appreciate the assumption I'm easy prey. I am Irish. We're different. We don't give a shit who you are. We've been colonized by the very worst of the spiritual worst, and we survived intact. Accordingly, when he shouts at me, "I don't like the language you're using in your print interviews," I say, "You mean English? Oh, I'm sorry about that. The Irish was beaten out of us." "No," he says, "I don't like you swearing." "I don't work for you," I tell him. "If you don't like it, you can fuck yourself." This really pisses him off, but he contains it in a silent seethe. He leaves the kitchen, and I hear him call several times for someone named Dwayne. His voice is farther away each time he shouts, so I know I have a moment to look for a back door. No luck. And soon I hear the footsteps of himself and also Igor returning. Before they can get to the door, I hear him summon me. I'm to follow him up a few steps into a tiny dining area. This I do, noticing as I pass Igor that he's keeping his eyes to the floor, very frightened, his body frozen in subservience. I sit at the table. I'm facing toward the courtyard. Himself is to my left. He shouts a violent order down the steps to Igor. He wants soup. He asks if I want any. I really don't want to be part of treating Igor badly, so I say I'm not hungry. It's very, very low light where we're sitting. We aren't saying anything. He's brooding. He shouts again, and after a while, poor Igor shuffles up the steps, carrying a silver tray that is draped with cream linen, and upon which stutter 2 bowls of soup and 2 spoons. He is carrying himself as if he's a battered child about to get beaten again. His hands are shaking, and he is cowed as if before a demon. It's the same abject fear my mother induced so often in my little brother. Igor looks like he's ready to piss his pants. He also seems woozy, as if drugged. He stands at the table in front of his master. He doesn't lower the tray. Maybe 20 seconds go by. His head is down. Looks like Oliver Twist asking for more. "You may put it down now," says himself. And this Igor does. Then stands back with his hands held as if there's a cap in them. For some reason, I know what's about to happen. "Serve Miss O'Connor some soup," himself barks at Igor. "I don't want any soup, thanks," I answer politely, patting my belly and looking at Igor as if to say, "I'm sure it's delicious, but I'm stuffed," just as my granny taught me. Igor's head doesn't move, but his eyes flash to me and then himself and then back to the floor. Rather like Mrs. Doyle in the BBC sitcom Father Ted, himself then begins repeatedly insisting to Igor that he serve me soup. Only unlike Mrs. Doyle, he spoke in such a demeaning and humiliating manner that poor Igor shook more and begged me with his eyes to let him serve me the stupid soup. But every time he moved towards me with the bowl, I held my hand up and said no thanks. Igor knew what was going on. I wasn't going to be part of humiliating him. I wouldn't have eaten the soup if my life depended on it. He finally placed the bowl back on the tray and stood holding the lot, not knowing what to do, looking like he was going to cry. Silence for some moments. Igor waiting for his lashing. It finally comes. Himself turns his vicious little face to mine and says in a tone that normal people would use when discussing feces, "This, by the way, is my brother Dwayne." I'm stunned, and I'm disgusted that he could treat his brother so badly. I express this as poor Dwayne fades out of the room. Things get heated. At some point himself decides we need to calm down, and he goes upstairs. I'm thinking presumably to powder his nose and make sure Dorian Gray's portrait is still okay in the attic. He comes down with 2 pillows and says, "Why don't we have a pillow fight?" All smiles and nice. And I think, okay, it wouldn't be every day that you'd get to have a pillow fight with Prince. What the hell? Let's try to make it a fun evening after the shitty start. Only on the first thump I get, I realise he's got something in the pillow, stuffed down the end, designed to hurt. He ain't playing at all. I get really annoyed and also really frightened. A few more thumps get exchanged and he goes upstairs again. By this time, we've somehow arrived beside the front door. I open it and run out. The driver is there in the parked limousine, heavily asleep. I don't want to wake him, but there's a huge gate, locked. I begin quietly calling for Dwayne. I run to the right where the outbuildings are, thinking maybe he lives there. Next thing, there's a swoosh and a sweet smell, and there's himself behind me. He orders me back into the house, and I obey. This is all too familiar for me to accept without protest, needless to say. I wish to leave, and am told I may not. After a while, he informs me that I may open the front door and tell his driver to take me home. I open the door so that there is some decent light, and I say I do not wish to wake the driver, that I would prefer to call a cab. Another temper tantrum ensues. How dare I not do as he is telling me? He stomps upstairs again. Right inside the front door there's a small chair. When he comes back down, he throws himself on it and sits staring at the floor, saying nothing for maybe 2 minutes. I stand very close in front of him, trying to reason with him about how I really don't feel very safe right now and would like to be in control of the manner in which I get home. He lifts his face up to mine, as close as 6 inches, and stares into my eyes for like 10 seconds. From the light through the open door, I see his eyes clearly. His irises dissolve in front of me, so that his eyes go pure white. They don't go up, they don't go down, they don't go left, they don't go right. They dissolve. I see it clear as day. I get a cold fear in my stomach and I run out the door again and shake the driver awake through his open window while yelling for Dwayne. I hear Dwayne's shuffle coming from the vicinity of the outbuildings, but before he can get to me, and before the driver has both eyes open, himself has me by the elbow. He orders Dwayne to back off and tells the driver to go to bed. They both do as they're told. Himself literally drags me towards the front door and orders me to stand on the step while he finds his car keys. No way in hell am I getting in a locked vehicle with this motherfucker, so I make a run for it around the left of the building and get about 500 feet in the darkness. I think I've gone beyond the boundaries of the property. There are some palm trees. I hide myself behind one and turn my head to see where he is. Seeing nothing, I take off my outer top, which is light-coloured. Underneath I'm wearing black. He won't see me. He'll be looking for what I was wearing. I hear him stomp about at the front of the house, shouting, but still not knowing how to pronounce my name. All he could do is say, "Where the fuck you gone?" And I hear the ground crunch a little in my direction, but he decides to go back and get in his car. He drives down the winding hill. I can see him clearly because of the car's lights. They also illuminate my pathway enough that I make him move from tree to tree each time he disappears down a bend, and after about half an hour I see the lights of a highway. By the time I make it all the way down, the sun is making its way up. I'm relieved. Everything is silver lit. I troop along, head hanging, trying to thumb a lift back to Los Feliz. Horribly familiar, the walk and the whole experience. I might as well have been in Glenageary. All the time I'm looking to make sure it ain't him that stops to give me a lift. Next thing, it fucking is him. He drives alongside me, rolls down the passenger window and orders me to get in, his left hand limp across his pimp rest. I tell him he can suck my dick, or some such. He screeches the car to a halt in the slow lane and gets out, starts chasing me round the car, telling me he's going to kick the shit out of me, as if I hadn't spotted Clue 1 at 10 p.m. I chase him back, and we run around the car for a few moments, him furious not to be able to catch me spitting at him like a cat that just had babies. I had been walking long enough that there were now houses on each side of the highway, with driveways of only about 6 feet in length. I recall my father telling me once that if ever I found myself in such a situation with a man, I should, after declaring my father is a policeman, ring someone's doorbell if possible and get help, and this I decide to do. First I run around after the stupid bastard, enough to observe his pattern. I know when I'll get my break, because he has to look to his right for a second before he runs into the road. Soon as he does that, I bolt up a drive and ring the first doorbell I come to and just keep ringing it. He jumps back in his car. My father was right. He sits and watches me for a minute, as if in the event of no answer he's contemplating another few laps. But he decides not to take the risk. He doesn't like light. Someone might have seen him. He turns the car around and speeds off, doesn't bother looking left at me as he passes. I walk ages more because no one answers at the house. I know he's gone. When I get to the first phone booth, I call my friend Kira, who's living with me. She comes to pick me up. I'm about 40 minutes away from home. After I tell Steve Farnoli, he goes berserk. He wants to go around and shoot Fluffy Cuffs, as does another of his Italian-American friends. They say I've been the victim of an attack that was actually meant to terrorize Steve. Apparently there's some legal proceedings going on between him and Prince. I don't know anything more about it. I don't care either. I never wanted to see that devil again. But I think of Dwayne fondly, quite often. That's why there's chocolate and vanilla. Besides being a great music manager, Steve Farnoley ran a few of what I can only describe as legal whorehouses. The law was in England, you could have one working woman and one secretary. There'd be a normal sex room and a beat-me-up room. Steve was a pimp. He didn't avail himself of the women's services, but they availed themselves of him, by which I mean he funded these people largely because he was a sucker for what he called the underbelly, and for beautiful women with sob stories. The horror business isn't at all unlike the music business, by the way. In fact, they're the very same. He called me one Thursday to cancel a meeting we had arranged for the following day. "I can't make it," he says. "We're putting in a dungeon tomorrow night. The cross is arriving." That's just what he did with his 20%. It was sweet and amusing. That's not what I call one of the ladies who was in his office one Friday night close to Christmas. An unpleasant blonde woman, a dominatrix, violent of spirit, who almost murderously despised men, including Steve. And indeed, she had Steve's office burgled a few times by her other handlers, despite his having taken care of her. He really was a sucker, innocent-hearted, blinded by the boobs and the baby talk. There really are guys like that, or used to be. Anyway, this lady pulls out a letter from one of her regular clients when I start asking her about what she does and how it all works. She tells me the guys who want the weird stuff don't want it for sexual purposes. It has nothing to do with sex. They just want to get treated like shit. She adores treating them like shit. Not for her sexual purposes either, just 'cause she's a total bitch. The letter says the guy is going to miss her over Christmas, and he's going to be practicing his barking techniques while she's away. Call me old-fashioned, but I had to ask her what on earth he was on about. She says every evening at 7, he calls her from his office, and she has him bark like a dog on the phone. I'm thinking, what about the cleaners? She says he comes round, and the deal is she treats him like a dog. She loves to kick him about. She says she makes him lap up bowls of her pee just to take it further than he intended, and she gets off on humiliating him, making him crawl around on his hands and knees like a dog. She's horrible, really horrible. Then she can put on this act of the lovely other woman when the normal sex dudes turn up. She'd knife her own granny is the truth. These poor guys have no idea who or what they're in the presence of. Steve's been my manager for about 12 years. I met him in Camden Palace after a Prince show, to which I had for some reason received an invitation. It was shortly after my first album came out, and quite some time before the song Nothing Compares to You ever entered my ether. He was born in Newport, Rhode Island. His father was a grocer. For some reason, the father gave everything he owned to Sly Stone so he could go on tour. And Sly didn't go on tour, so Steve's father went broke. Steve, as a teenager, went to Los Angeles, tracked Sly down and battered his door in, forced him out on the road, so Steve's father was paid back the money. That's how Steve got into the music business. Actually, before that, he worked at the Newport Jazz Festival. His job was to knock on Ella Fitzgerald's door and say, "5 minutes, Miss Fitzgerald." He told me he was a singer in a band once, but he gave up when he saw Robert Plant singing. He said there was no point continuing. After Prince's Camden Palace show, the next time I saw Steve was at a picnic on Hampstead Heath with some friends of his, for no reason other than social. It was sunny and nice. He was fun, the kind of person who would make you not want to wander home. When things broke down between myself and Faulkner, I asked Steve to take over, and he did so very passionately. He looks like a teddy bear. He has white hair and chubby cheeks, and is plump in an Italian guy who loves food way. He wears thick glasses, and he literally cannot see a thing without them. His tiny little mother's name is Rose, and sometimes she'd invite us and his stable of girls all over to the house in Malibu, and she'd just cook zillions of dishes. He looks after her like she's gold dust, and she is. He adores her. His father has been dead a long time. Steve is everyone's father, except his actual daughter's. That's an issue between us sometimes, that he didn't have enough to do with his child. Anyway, Steve loves lap dancing clubs and ladies generally, so we all tagged along with him and his friends, one of whom I'm insanely in love with, to the clubs in Atlanta one night, and marvelled at the boob jobs. And I could tell you, there absolutely is sex in the champagne room. Janet Street Porter, the journalist and broadcaster, is in love with Steve, but they're best friends. All of us are a bit in love with him, but he doesn't care for sex, etc., from anyone or anywhere. He's in love with some extraordinarily high-maintenance German bird who works for MTV, but she's always breaking his heart. She does the reach and withdraw technique better than any man. Up until a while ago, she was threatening to marry the Pakistani powerhouse Imran Khan. She was going around wearing a hijab. But he's just gone off and married Jemima Goldsmith, so it's all high drama, and Steve says now she wants looking after. He drinks green alcohol when we're out and she's around, so he's blasted. He's like a little boy in a sweet shop. Reason Steve's a target is he's stinking rich. Remember, he used to manage Prince, and he has other businesses, all honest and above board. He's a person who does good. All the high-maintenance ladies want a rich dude. Only problem is, if you get Steve, you get all the rest of us as well. And of course, you have to get past Janet Street Porter, and that is no easy task. She'd be a good match, in all honesty, because she's stinking rich too, and she loves him. She doesn't want him for the reasons all the high-class ladies want him. Steve and her make each other laugh. He does love her, but he loves all women. That's the deal with Steve. He ain't boyfriend or husband material. I respect Steve to the hilt otherwise. He's an angel sent from heaven, and I really wish heaven didn't want him. He's had cancer, and the doctors had him running all over town, having all manner of horrible and pointless surgeries. He's gone through 2 years of hell for nothing. It is common for music business people to feel truly at home only in hotels. Steve doesn't have a home. He loves 5-star hotels, and he has lived in those, circling around, as it were, trying them all. In 2001, in the W Hotel in LA, he lies dying. Every day, behind reception downstairs, is a different beautiful young woman, stretched out in a human-sized fish tank, which is empty of water, thank God, playfully pulling at the fluffy turquoise shag pile. She's wearing a bikini. All the better for seducing with uplifted eyes the gentlemen as they check in. The whole scenario is very Farnoli, as we who adore him would say. I really don't know what will become of any of us now. The millisecond his best friend Arnon stepped into the lift after saying goodbye, there was a tiny earthquake, lasted about 7 seconds. I know it was his grief, don't care what anyone says. The man's poor heart was broken in the desert, and God was with him. War, Part 1, Saturday Night Live, 1992. Down on St. Mark's Place and Avenue A, there's a tiny Irish bar, run by a giant Irishman who has salt and pepper hair down to his shoulders, which stoop because he doesn't feel too good about himself. But he's an all-right guy. He's kind. Yeah, he wears black all the time, and doom is in his features so that his face even looks like Ireland. But he loves his girlfriend so much that it lights up like England when he sees her. Irish bars I hate though. Nothing but drunk people hanging onto your elbow, talking shite and crying. I don't like Irish music either, but I like me a smoke. So I sit outside on the pavement with coffee and hope the bastard cop with the stupid Prince Albert moustache who once kicked a spliff out of my hand doesn't show up. Supposedly, he's in the hooers' apartments above the stores, snorting coke when he's off duty. He'd be better off sticking to the spliff and not kicking the ladies. One night about 1 a.m, I see that directly opposite the Irish bar, a new juice bar has opened. A sign on the pavement says it stays open till the wee hours. I see there's lovely coloured paintings on the walls and cheerful-looking oranges and apples piled up together at the cash register in a visual antithesis of Ireland. People seem to be having quite the giggle, so I take up my equipment and wander over. Great balls of fire! I find several long-locked West Indians skinning up weed in fresh tobacco leaves and listening to Rasta music. Fuck the Irish bar. The juice bar becomes home. From then on, I go over to the Irish bar only for the purposes of quickly replenishing my coffee. The West Indians won't cross the 12 feet of road to sit in the Irish bar. They don't trust white people, and they don't trust coffee either. They'd first thought I was a boy. Whole place all a cackle when the truth was revealed. Happens I announce I'm in love with Robert Downey Jr. one evening. Horrified, silent faces, having uttered Bible quotes as to the wrongness of homosexuality, become fountains of laughter after I, in equal horror at their thinking me male, open my coat and lift up my jumper so they can see my mangy down sports bra and pregnancy stretch marks. I'm obviously ignorant in the Rastafari department. First thing the guy in charge of the juice bar had to point out to me was, not everyone who has locks is Rasta. More laughs. But he went on to prove it to me over time. His name is Terry. He's from St. Lucia. He's short like me, long locks. He's dark, sallow, same colour as Peanut Crunch. Tells me someone in his family way back shagged a Chinaman. I tell him we have something in common then, since I'm pale, sallow, because someone way back in my family shagged a Spaniard. I'd fretfully fled to New York from London in the winter, and I hadn't remembered to pack a coat. I was frozen. Terry drove all the way to his house and got me one of his, a huge black leather parka, way too big for me. I was swamped in it. All the guys were laughing at me, but I love it more than any garment from Chanel because it's his. He's become my teacher. I didn't ask him to be. He took it upon himself because I wouldn't shut up asking him questions about Rastafari. Sometimes, the way he leans his head back and looks at me puzzled, I know he's asking himself, what is God trying to tell me via these questions? But I don't know why he needs to ask. I feel worried. He gets terribly calm, keeps folding the t-shirts and acting like the place really is just a juice bar. He drives me round the outskirts of New York City in the early hours of the morning to eat ackee and saltfish with elderly Jamaicans who are grocers and fishmongers and butchers and such. Backstage, in their stores or concrete warehouses, there's always an extremely well-worn sofa or two and a makeshift kitchen. Not all the old men are Rastas, but the majority are. They range from, I'd say, 40 to 70. There's never fewer than 3. They wait the night with one another. They don't fall asleep. God doesn't have to wake them and say, could you not keep me company in my madness? Jamaicans don't do small talk. At first, this is a bit uncomfortable because Irish people are always filling the gaps. I find myself in silence in fish-filled vans making deliveries, just like I did with my grandfather. I thought they didn't like me was why they were silent, but it ain't anything other than they are watchers. They are watching out for God everywhere. They're like God's security detail. That's how they see themselves, and that is exactly how they are. They're like Saint Michael leading God's angels to war against Satan. Like zillions of St. Michaels, all rolled into one huge pyre of prophecy. They're watching for the devil too. That's the enemy of God. The devil is their Lee Harvey Oswald. They only speak when it's about scripture. In the backs of their stores, they call me Sista or Data as they hand me saucers of food. Start small, they say. It worries them I don't eat. I've just never been an eater. My blood is too anxious. The elders don't eat meat, but they eat fried fish and sweet potatoes and rice and peas. Rice and peas is actually rice and kidney beans cooked in coconut milk. Best thing a person could eat. I'm glad because I particularly hate peas unless I'm playing that game where each person puts a frozen pea in one nostril and holds the other nostril closed, and whoever manages to snot the pea out furthest is the winner. The elders can't say Ireland. They call it Ireland. They read from the Nevi'im, the biblical prophets, while I turn my face and scoff, secretly loving the food, but also feeling that painful humiliation from childhood that comes when I register hunger. It's too connected with my mother. I can't accept it. Food turns to pebbles in my mouth. Like Lot's wife looking back, I resist it, as if to prove I'm totally in God's hands. But the elders are right, and they stress good food, not just food. They wouldn't spoon more to me, laughing softly at the backs of their throats with pleasure when they see I've cleaned the saucer. They actually do treat me like a stray kitten. They say my whiskers are as white as theirs. When I trust them, they decide to teach me. They do this without my even realizing it's being done. They don't sit me down and say this, that, or the other. They do it by the things they talk about with one another when I'm present. They read from the book of Revelation and loudly discuss the fact it's about the end of religion, hopping about laughing for joy, yelling Jah and Rastafari and Dread-Eye, with their arms up in the air as if the prophecy has already been fulfilled. The one thing they do direct at me is discussion of Ireland. Hinglan is a natural enemy of Ireland, you know see that? I reply I'd have to be blind not to see it. They tell me, and the Pope are the devil, so the devil are the real enemy. They tell me, Jah dwelling shall be on earth among the human race. In Terry's juice bar, there's a Rasta painting on the wall. There's an altar at the end of a long black and white tiled cathedral floor. A skinny black king with the kindest face imaginable is seated on a massive golden throne replete with Amharic inscriptions. There are dark-skinned elders seated on both sides along the length of the floor, misted. You can't tell who they are, lions or ancient souls. A tiny woman in a white shift is standing at the foot of the throne, facing the emperor. Her right hand is outstretched. She's asking him to come into the city. His dais is so high above her, she reaches only to his knees. He relaxes in his chair and leans back on his elbow, tilting his head forward, smiling kindly. Her skin is white and her head is shaved. One early evening while I'm in New York to rehearse for Saturday Night Live, I'm gazing at the painting when suddenly Terry gestures for everyone to leave except me. Then he closes the shop door, pulls the shutters down quickly and asks me to sit beside him right there on the floor. His face looks sorrowful as he takes my hands in his. He has something to tell me. He says he wants me to try to forgive him. He tells me that he's soon going to get killed. He says someone tried to kill him before in a drive-by. He was in his car with some friends. Another car rolled up beside them and they shot at him 7 times. He says they'll get him eventually. I ask him why, and I can't bear the answer I get. He runs guns and drugs. He's been using kids as mules. They have guns and drugs in their school bags, not books. He's moved in on someone's territory, and it's only a matter of time. I'm horrified by what he's been doing and that he's going to be murdered. There is much pacing in the juice bar over the course of the week. That Friday night, he gives me a gold ring with a red oval stone on which is carved most finely a Roman soldier's head. Fucking treacherous bastard. I could kill him myself. Not a Rasta on earth would touch 7,000 pounds of weed if it had a Roman soldier on it. Never mind bejewel themselves with such a thing. I give it to Rufus, another Rasta, who, picking it up from my palm, repeatedly asks why. He thinks maybe I mean romance. I don't. I mean the soldier looks like him. Silly fucker takes this as a compliment. I realise in that millisecond what the rabbi meant back in London when he said don't forget to leave the party before they all get drunk and start fighting. I climbed the 3 heavy steps up from the shop onto St. Mark's Place, turn left onto Avenue A and hail myself a cab. The driver, softly clicking his tongue against his back teeth as if he were calling a puppy, pleads with me to consider having sex with him. I don't know where he imagines we're going to do it, certainly not in the front seat. To say he's consumed a few too many patties would be an understatement. We're talking American XXXL. I decline, informing him I've had a very unsexy evening. Sweetly, he sings me Underneath the Mango Tree to cheer me up as we push through the lights of Manhattan to my other world, wherein I pace the fluffy floors of my hotel suite until 6 a.m. War, Part 2. Gotta serve somebody. The day my mother died, myself and my siblings went inside her house for the first time in several years. Our own secrets to seek, not hers. There were still broken plastic swans in the bathroom, resolute, long-necked, frozen as if nothing had happened. I took down from her bedroom wall the only photo she ever had up there, which was of Pope John Paul II. It was taken when he visited Ireland in 1979. "Young people of Ireland," he had said after making a show of kissing the ground at Dublin Airport like the flight had been overly frightening. "I love you." What a load of claptrap. Nobody loved us, not even God. Sure, even our mothers and fathers couldn't stand us. In 1978, Bob Geldof ripped up a photo of Olivia Newton-John and John Travolta on Top of the Pops because their shit record Summer Nights had been #1 for 7 weeks, and finally Geldof's Boomtown Rat single, Rat Trap, had taken over. My intention had always been to destroy my mother's photo of the Pope. It represented lies and liars and abuse. The type of people who kept these things were devils like my mother. I never knew when or where or how I would destroy it, but destroy it I would when the right moment came. And with that in mind, I carefully brought it everywhere I lived from that day forward, because nobody ever gave a shit about the children of Ireland. I've woken after going to bed at 6 a.m. It's 1 p.m., only a few hours until camera rehearsal for SNL. I'm to perform 2 songs, the second of which is Bob Marley's War, a cappella. The lyric is actually a speech given to the United Nations by the Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie in New York in 1963 about racism being the cause of all wars. But I'm going to change a few lines to be a declaration of war against child abuse because I'm pissed at Terry for what he told me last night, and I'm pissed he's been using kids to run drugs, and I'm pissed he's going to be dead by Monday. It also happens I've been pissed off for a few weeks because I've been reading The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail, a contrarian, blasphemous history of the early church. But also, I found a tiny article buried in the back pages of an Irish newspaper about families whose children had been abused by priests, but whose stories were not believed by the police, who had lost their files, in inverted commas. So I've been thinking even more of destroying my mother's photo of JP2. And I decide tonight is the night. I bring the photo to the NBC studio and hide it in the dressing room. At the rehearsal, when I finish singing Bob Marley's War, I hold up a photo of a Brazilian street kid who was killed by cops. I asked the cameraman to zoom in on the photo during the actual show. I don't tell him what I have in mind for later on. Everyone's happy. A dead child far away is no one's problem. I know if I do this there'll be war, but I don't care. I know my scripture. Nothing can touch me. I reject the world. Nobody can do a thing to me that hasn't been done already. I can sing in the streets like I used to. It's not like anyone will tear my throat out. Showtime. I'm wearing a white lace dress that once belonged to Sade. I bought it at a rock and roll auction in London when I was 19. Paid £800 for it. It's beautiful. There's a coin-sized lead weight in each side of the slit at the back to keep it straight and make it hang ladylike. Very clever. A dress for women to behave badly in. One day maybe I will have a daughter who gets married in it. So the show goes on. First song, Success Has Made a Failure of Our Home, is a dream. Plenty of people milling about backstage afterwards. Producers, managers, makeup artists, and fellow guests. I'm the flavour of the month. Everyone wants to talk to me, tell me how I'm a good girl, but I know I'm an imposter. Second song is set up beautifully, with one candle beside me and my Rasta prayer cloth tied to the microphone. I sing War a cappella. No one suspects a thing, but at the end, I don't hold up the child's picture. I hold up JP2's photo and then rip it into pieces. I yell, "Fight the real enemy!" I'm talking to those who are going to kill Terry, and I blow out the candle. Total stunned silence in the audience, and when I walk backstage, literally not a human being is in sight. All doors have closed, everyone has vanished, including my own manager, who locks himself in his room for 3 days and unplugs his phone. Everyone wants a pop star, see, but I'm a protest singer. I just had stuff to get off my chest. I had no desire for fame. In fact, that's why I chose the first song. Success was making a failure of my life, because everybody was already calling me crazy for not acting like a pop star, for not worshipping fame. And I understand I've torn up the dreams of those around me, but those aren't my dreams. No one ever asked me what my dreams were. They just got mad at me for not being who they wanted me to be. My own dream is only to keep the contract I made with God before I ever made one with the music business, and that's a better fight than murder. I got to get to the other side of life. I am in my dressing room with my personal assistant, Kira. We pack up my bags and leave the building. Outside 30 Rock, 2 young men are waiting for me, and they throw a load of eggs at us both. But what they don't know is myself and Kira are able to run 100 metres in 11.3 seconds, so we run after them when they flee. We catch up with them in some alley. They are leaning, gasping for breath against a black fence they didn't have the strength to climb. All we say, laughing at them, is, "Hey, don't be throwing eggs at women." The 2 of them are so shocked at being chased and caught that they start laughing too, and it all ends very friendly. They straighten up and help us find a cab back to the hotel. The matter is being discussed on the news, and we learn that I'm banned from NBC for life. This hurts me a lot less than rapes hurt those Irish children, and a lot less than Terry dying, which happens on the following Monday morning anyway. It ain't necessarily so. A lot of people say or think that tearing up the Pope's photo derailed my career. That's not how I feel about it. I feel that having a #1 record derailed my career, and my tearing the photo put me back on the right track. I had to make my living performing live again, and that's what I was born for. I wasn't born to be a pop star. You have to be a good girl for that, not be too troubled. I wasn't comfortable with what other people call success, because it meant I had to be as others wanted me to be. After Saturday Night Live, I could just be me, do what I love, be imperfect, be mad even, anything. I don't define success as having a good name or being wealthy. I define success by whether I keep the contract I made with the Holy Spirit before I made one with the music business. I never signed anything that said I would be a good girl. I have supported my 4 children for 35 years. I supported us by performing live, and I became, if I may say so, a very fine live performer. So, far from the Pope episode destroying my career, it set me on a path that fit me better. I'm not a pop star. I'm just a troubled soul who needs to scream into mics now and then. I don't need to be number one. I don't need to be liked. I don't need to be welcome at the AMAs. I just need to pay my yearly overheads, get shit off my chest, and not compromise or prostitute myself spiritually. So no, I wasn't derailed. I was re-railed. And I feel I've been extremely successful as a single mother providing for her children. My condition is in 1992, a few days later. So I checked into the Chelsea Hotel this morning. It happens that none other than D.D. Ramone lives there, and he knocks on my door, bearing not a pie or a cake, but a few tabs of acid, and asks me would I like to partake. I don't tell him I've never done it before, and I scarf down one tab while he scarfs down another. I notice he is very underweight. Doesn't seem he cares for food any more than I do, which is pretty much not at all. We go wandering into the streets of the city, heading we know not where, and dancing to the music being played in various cabs we pass. We even stick our heads into one driver's open window because he's stuck in a traffic jam and blaring Ella Fitzgerald. He shows us the CD cover. She's all in pink and smiling. I hold the cover and read everything on it, both sides, like Aunt Frances taught me to. Clearly, this is not Dee first rodeo when it comes to taking drugs, and his head is fucked. After an hour or two, he plonks himself on a step somewhere and starts acting like Sybil in the eponymous movie about multiple personalities. The people, the people, the people. He thinks everyone is staring at him. They aren't. Or if they are, it's just because he looks like he's going to pass out. He decides to go back to the Chelsea Hotel and leave me on my own. I don't mind this arrangement. Means I'm free to go to St. Mark's and Avenue A, which I duly do. I meet my friend Rabbi at Terry's place. I don't know his real name. He's nicknamed Rabbi because he's always talking about God. He's a fiery Rasta-looking type, but very angry. Not a real Rasta. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if he's bumped off a few people. He has a nasty streak in him. Sometimes I don't know why I hang out with him. I think it's only that he's interesting. He and I head to the park. It's still daytime. I find myself smiling at strangers. Acid is like that. Turns you back into a child, so you're open to people the way you were when you were small. A blonde lady is smiling back at me, sitting with her husband or whatever he is. I realise I must leave Rabbi and go back to the Irish bar when he starts feeling my hands in a manner that suggests he fancies a lap or two in the labba, Irish for bed. I'm uninterested. I don't feel that way about him. Who wants to go to bed with someone so grumpy? After that night, I don't do acid again until I'm 33, in a rockabilly club on London's Oxford Street with my friend B.P. Fallon, an Irish radio host. He loves rockabilly music. I can't bloody stand it. So I'm begging him, can we please leave the club? He insists we have to stay. I'm stone cold sober after an hour, so I figured the acid is crap. As crap as the music. And I steal Beep's, his nickname is Beep, whole bag of acid, lock myself in the toilet and scarf up the lot while he's banging on the door threatening to kill me when I exit. I'm laughing my head off as I eat every tab in the bag. Still, I'm sober as a judge after another hour. Nothing is happening. This is not acid. It's just some little cardboard squares, and Beep has clearly been ripped off. Still, he won't leave the club, and we end up staying there for a total of 3 hours. Finally, about midnight, he says we can go. Well, as soon as my right foot hits Oxford Street, whoosh, I'm flying. The music hadn't let me trip because I hated it. I didn't know until this night how deep my relationship to music is. Cry laughing, my favourite feeling in the world, and fascinated by the stars. We go to my house and light the fire. A fire looks like it's made of maggots when you're on acid. It's the weirdest thing. Makes me wonder if everything is secretly made of maggots. I get obsessed with letting the garden into the house and fling open all the windows in case it decides to accept my invitation. Never happens, of course. We just sit all night talking. At one point, a bunch of flowers on my piano vanishes before my eyes, and all I see is the word monster. But as soon as I realize that's just some bullshit in my mind, the flowers reappear and start dancing. So I learned to control my mind on acid far better than I could without it. I did ecstasy a few times, hated it, crying the next day for anyone's mother curled up in a fetal position. Same with coke. Twice I did it, hated it. Next day crying like a cartoon. The tears not falling down my face but flying straight, horizontally. Nothing nice about it. Depressed and $20 poorer. Not worth it at all. Took my manners. Heroin I smoked once. It was disgusting. Never did it again. Next drug I did was speed in the nut house, believe it or not, in Dublin. I get to call it a nut house because I'm a nut. No one else gets to call it that. In the locked ward where they put you if you're suicidal, there's more Class A drugs than in Shane McGowan's dressing room. They never check the bags visitors bring. It's not like in America, where even your granny would be frisked up against a wall and chucked out if she brought you so much as a bottle of perfume. So yeah, I'm on speed in there for 1 week, probably one of the happiest weeks of my life.